"So, let me get this straight," one contractor said, scratching his head. "You want a river in your backyard?" "Technically a decorative water feature," I corrected, flashing my most charming smile. "Think of it as a moat, but with less alligators and more inner tubes." He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "A moat? Are you eccentric? A visionary? A champion of aquatic landscaping?" I offered. "Take your pick." It took a few tries, but finally I found my guy. A grizzled old veteran named Frank, who'd clearly seen it all. He looked at my plans, let out a low whistle, and said, "All right, kid, you're on. But if the HOA comes knocking, I'm blaming it all on you." "Deal," I said, shaking his hand. "And Frank, discretion is key. Think Ocean's 11, but with less casino heisting and more backyard shenanigans." Ah, the joys of homeownership. Remember that feeling? The excitement of finally having your own space, a place to call your own. A backyard where you could, well, do whatever you wanted. That's what I thought when I moved into my peaceful suburban haven. And for a glorious summer, it was pure bliss. I'd spend my days lounging by my beautiful pool, the sun warming my skin, a cool drink in hand. The gentle splashing of the water was the perfect soundtrack to my relaxation, drowning out the noise of the world. It was my own private oasis, a sanctuary from the daily grind. But then, like a dark cloud on a sunny day, the HOA arrived. They came bearing a letter. A ridiculous, pompous letter filled with words like eyesore and aesthetic values. Apparently my pool, my beautiful, relaxing pool, was disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood. Leading the charge was Bartholomew Bart Prescott III, the HOA president. This guy was like a caricature of a retired corporate lawyer. Think perfectly pressed suits, slicked back hair, and a vocabulary that would make a dictionary blush. He oozed superiority, like he'd single-handedly invented the concept of lawn gnomes and perfectly trimmed hedges. "Your pool," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain, "is a violation of our community standards. It clashes with the overall aesthetic and detracts from the uniformity we strive for." Uniformity? Seriously? But logic and reason were apparently foreign concepts to the HOA. They were obsessed with power, with enforcing their arbitrary rules, with making sure everyone's lawn was precisely the same shade of green. And so they issued their ultimatum. Remove the pool within 30 days, or face serious fines. That's when I realized something profound. I could play by their rules, or I could play by my own. And my rules involved a whole lot of water and a healthy dose of HOA-defying fun. All right, so armed with my meticulously crafted arguments and a PowerPoint presentation titled "Pools, Not Actually the Devil's Work," I marched into the HOA meeting. The room was filled with the usual suspects. Bart Prescott, looking like he'd just stepped out of a taxidermy convention. Mr. Henderson, scowling at the world from behind his oversized glasses. And Mrs. Johnson, furiously knitting while eavesdropping on every conversation. "Mr. Prescott," I began, my voice dripping with forced politeness, "I'm here to appeal your decision regarding my pool." Bart adjusted his glasses, his gaze as sharp as a hawk eyeing a particularly plump squirrel. "And what, pray tell, is the basis of your appeal?" I launched into my carefully prepared arguments. Firstly, I followed all the guidelines when I installed the pool. Secondly, several other houses in the neighborhood have pools, so why am I being singled out? And finally, it's just a pool. It's water in a hole in the ground. It's not exactly a threat to national security. The HOA members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mr. Henderson grumbled something about property values and unsightly distractions. Mrs. Johnson's knitting needles clicked with increased ferocity. Bart, however, remained unmoved. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, The board has decided that your pool disrupts the aesthetic harmony of the community. Therefore, it must be removed." "Aesthetic harmony?" I scoffed. "Have you seen Mr. Henderson's collection of rusty lawn ornaments? That's a true assault on the senses." But my sarcasm was lost on them. The HOA was like a brick wall, immovable, unyielding, and utterly obsessed with their own power. I realized then that playing by their rules was a fool's errand. It was time for a new strategy, one that involved a healthy dose of defiance and a whole lot of water. All right, time to get sneaky. Remember that ridiculously thick rule book? The one that probably doubles as a cure for insomnia? Well, I decided to give it another look. This time, though, I wasn't looking for rules. I was looking for loopholes. And boy, did I find one. Turns out those HOA geniuses forgot to explicitly ban water-based landscaping. They also conveniently omitted any rules about the amount of water you could use, as long as it was part of a decorative feature. A mischievous grin spread across my face. "Oh, Bart," I chuckled, "you just handed me the keys to the kingdom." The plan started to form in my mind, like a beautiful HOA-defying puzzle. I wouldn't just remove the pool, I'd expand it. I'd transform it into a magnificent lazy river, a meandering waterway that would encircle my entire house. Imagine crystal clear water flowing gently around my property, lush greenery lining the banks, maybe a few strategically placed waterfalls for added ambiance. It would be a tropical paradise, a haven of relaxation, and a giant middle finger to the HOA all rolled into one. And the best part? It would be perfectly legal. After all, it's not a pool, it's a decorative water feature. Checkmate, HOA. Okay, with my plan in place, it was time to put Operation Lazy River into action. I needed a crew, and I needed them discreetly. No way was I letting the HOA get wind of this before it was too late. So I put on my best innocent homeowner face and started interviewing contractors. "Irrigation," I'd say. "That's my main concern. Need to make sure my lawn is lush and HOA approved." I'd wink, and most contractors got the hint. They'd quote me for some sprinklers, maybe a new drainage system, and we'd both leave with a silent understanding. But finding someone to build a full-blown lazy river around my house, that was a tougher sell. "So, let me get this straight," one contractor said, scratching his head. "You want a river in your backyard?" "Technically a decorative water feature," I corrected, flashing my most charming smile. "Think of it as a moat, but with less alligators and more inner tubes." He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "A moat? Lady, are you eccentric? A visionary, a champion of aquatic landscaping?" I offered. "Take your pick." It took a few tries, but finally I found my guy. A grizzled old veteran named Frank, who'd clearly seen it all. He looked at my plans, let out a low whistle, and said, "All right, kid, you're on. But if the HOA comes knocking, I'm blaming it all on you." "Deal," I said, shaking his hand. "And Frank, discretion is key. Think Ocean's 11, but with less casino heisting and more backyard shenanigans." And with that, the transformation began. Construction crews arrived bright and early, armed with shovels, excavators, and enough concrete to build a small fortress. The sound of hammering and drilling filled the air, but I played it cool. "Just some irrigation improvements," I'd tell the neighbors, my voice dripping with innocence. The HOA, bless their oblivious hearts, remained none the wiser. They were too busy measuring lawn gnome heights and debating the acceptable shade of beige for mailboxes to notice the massive earthworks happening in my backyard. Day by day, my vision came to life. The pool, once a solitary oasis, was now the starting point of a meandering waterway. It curved around the house, disappearing behind strategically placed palm trees and re-emerging with a gentle waterfall. Underwater lights shimmered, casting an ethereal glow on the water. Koi fish, imported from Japan, swam lazily in a newly built pond. It was absurd, it was over the top, and it was absolutely glorious. My backyard was no longer just a backyard. It was a water wonderland, a testament to my defiance and a giant screw you to the HOA. And the best part? They were completely clueless. Until, of course, they weren't. All right, the moment had arrived. Weeks of clandestine construction, mountains of dirt, and enough concrete to build a small city. It all culminated in this. The grand unveiling of my backyard paradise, my masterpiece of HOA defiance, my lazy river fortress. I invited a few close friends and neighbors over for the inaugural voyage. They arrived, eyes wide with anticipation, ready to witness the madness that had unfolded behind my once ordinary fence. "Welcome," I announced, gesturing grandly towards the backyard, "to my humble abode, now featuring the ultimate aquatic escape." And with that, I swung open the gate, revealing the transformed landscape. Gasps of awe and delighted laughter filled the air. The lazy river, a shimmering ribbon of crystal-clear water, snaked its way around the property. Lush tropical plants lined the banks, their vibrant colors creating a sense of exotic escape. The gentle gurgle of the water mingled with the sound of bird song, creating a symphony of relaxation. Strategically placed waterfalls cascaded over moss-covered rocks, adding a touch of drama and a soothing white noise soundtrack. Underwater lights, shimmering like 1,000 tiny stars, illuminated the depths of the river, creating an ethereal glow. My friends and neighbors were speechless. They wandered along the stone pathways, their fingers trailing in the cool water. They marveled at the koi pond, where brightly colored fish darted amongst the lily pads. They plopped onto inflatable tubes and drifted along the lazy river, their faces etched with wonder. "This is incredible," exclaimed one neighbor, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's like a 5-star resort, but without the overpriced cocktails and the screaming kids." "I can't believe you pulled this off," said another, shaking his head in admiration. "The HOA must be losing their minds." Speaking of the HOA. Oh, they lost their minds all right. It wasn't long before Bart Prescott and his cronies arrived, their faces a mixture of outrage and bewilderment. They stomped through my backyard, their voices echoing with indignation. This is an outrage," sputtered Bart, his face turning an interesting shade of puce. "This is a blatant disregard for community standards. This is wet." I raised an eyebrow. "Wet? Yes, Bart, it is wet. It's a water feature, that's kind of the point." But the rules," he protested, waving his HOA rulebook like a weapon. "You can't just build a river in your backyard." "Actually," I said, pulling out my own copy of the rulebook, "there's nothing in here that says I can't. It's all perfectly legal, Bart. You see, it's not a pool, it's a decorative water feature. And as for the amount of water, well, let's just say I'm a big fan of hydration." The HOA members sputtered and fumed, but their protests were drowned out by the sound of laughter and splashing. The neighbors, once hesitant, were now fully on board with my backyard paradise. They were floating, swimming, and generally having a grand old time. The contrast was stark. On one side, the HOA, fuming and powerless. On the other, a community united in their enjoyment of my creation. It was a beautiful sight, a testament to the power of defiance and the enduring appeal of a good lazy river. And as I watched the HOA stomp off, defeated and drenched, thanks to a strategically placed sprinkler, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. The lazy river revolution had begun. My backyard, once a quiet haven of suburban normalcy, is now the hottest spot in town. News of my lazy river spread like wildfire, and suddenly I was the most popular person in the neighborhood. Kids, with their boundless energy and insatiable thirst for fun, were practically lining up at my gate. Parents, desperate for a break from the monotony of summer vacation, were offering me baked goods and babysitting services in exchange for a few hours of aquatic bliss. Even those grumpy teenagers, who usually wouldn't be caught dead outside without their phones, were ditching their screens and embracing the joys of floating aimlessly in a giant inflatable donut. The atmosphere was pure magic. Laughter echoed through the air as kids splashed and played. Parents chatted and relaxed, sipping iced tea and soaking up the sun. And those teenagers? Well, they were busy creating epic TikTok videos showcasing the wonders of my backyard water park to the world. My lazy river became a viral sensation. People were sharing videos, tagging their friends, and planning pilgrimages from all corners of the city. I even had a few local celebrities show up, eager to experience the HOA-defying oasis they'd heard so much about. The HOA, meanwhile, was watching their carefully constructed world crumble around them. Their attempts to shut down the fun had backfired spectacularly. They were now the villains in this story, the grumpy old folks who hated laughter and sunshine. Bart Prescott, bless his pompous heart, tried to maintain control. He issued stern pronouncements about unruly behavior and excessive noise levels. But his words were met with eye rolls and sarcastic laughter. "Oh, Bart," one neighbor chuckled, "relax. It's just a little fun. Besides, haven't you heard? Laughter is good for the soul and bad for the HOA." The HOA's meetings became increasingly sparsely attended. Their pronouncements were ignored. Their authority was waning faster than a cheap inflatable pool toy. They were like a band playing to an empty stadium, their music drowned out by the joyous screams of children and the gentle splashing of water. It was a beautiful thing to witness. The community had rallied around my lazy river, embracing the joy and freedom it represented. The HOA, once the undisputed rulers of the neighborhood, were now a laughingstock, a relic of a bygone era where beige reigned supreme and fun was outlawed. And as I floated along my lazy river, watching the sun set over my water wonderland, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I had not only defied the HOA, but I had also created something truly special for my community. A place where laughter echoed, friendships blossomed, and the spirit of fun reigned supreme. The HOA wasn't about to go down without a fight. They might have been losing the popularity contest, but they still had their rule books and their fine print fury. First came the fines. They slapped me with a hefty bill for violating community aesthetic standards and unauthorized water usage. I chuckled as I read the notice. Did they really think a few pieces of paper were going to scare me? I countered with a legal notice of my own, citing obscure landscaping laws and highlighting the HOA's blatant hypocrisy. "Remember Karen's rock garden?" I wrote, attaching a photo of the monstrosity. "Seems like aesthetic standards are a bit subjective, wouldn't you say?" The HOA sputtered and fumed, but they backed down. They knew they couldn't win a legal battle against a homeowner with a lazy river and a lawyer on speed dial. But they weren't done yet. Oh no, they resorted to more creative tactics. One morning, I woke up to find my lazy river mysteriously drained. Did someone pull the plug on paradise? I wondered, my heart sinking. But then I noticed the culprit. A garden gnome, strategically placed to block the water intake valve. "Seriously?" I muttered, shaking my head. "Garden gnome warfare, that's the best you've got?" The neighborhood, however, was having none of it. A group of kids, armed with water balloons and super soakers, launched a counteroffensive against the HOA's gnome army. Mr. Henderson's prized flamingo collection mysteriously disappeared. Rumor has it they were last seen floating down the lazy river. And Mrs. Johnson, the gossip queen, started spreading rumors about the HOA's nefarious plot to destroy community fun. The HOA's attempts at sabotage backfired spectacularly. They were now seen as not just killjoys, but also as petty vandals. Their support dwindled faster than a melting ice cream cone on a hot summer day. But they were getting desperate. They held another emergency meeting, this time with a new strategy. Declare the lazy river a hazard. It's a drowning risk, they claimed. It's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. It's attracting pirates. Okay, maybe not that last one, but they were getting pretty creative with their excuses. They threatened to shut down the whole operation, to force me to fill in my beloved lazy river and return my backyard to its former state of boring normalcy. But just when I thought all hope was lost, a miracle happened. A celebrity miracle. I'm chilling in my backyard, soaking up the sun and the sweet satisfaction of HOA defiance, when a moving truck pulls up next door. New neighbors, I think. Hope they're not HOA cronies. But then, out steps the local celebrity. You know, the one whose face is plastered on billboards and whose name is always in the gossip columns. The one with the perfect smile, the perfect hair, and the perfect life. They wave, I wave back, and then it happens. The celebrity, with a twinkle in their eye and a mischievous grin, approaches the fence. I love what you've done with the place, they say, gesturing towards my glorious lazy river. Always wanted one of those myself. Mind if I take a closer look? Mind? Are you kidding me? I practically roll out the red carpet, or, you know, the welcome mat. I give them the grand tour, explaining the finer points of lazy river construction and HOA defiance. The celebrity is enthralled. This is amazing, they exclaim. I need one of these in my life. Think your contractor is available? Now, I'm not one to gossip, but word travels fast in suburbia. And when word reached the HOA that a celebrity was not only admiring my lazy river, but also planning to build their own, well, let's just say it caused a major meltdown. Bart Prescott, bless his power-hungry heart, went into full damage control mode. He called an emergency HOA meeting, but this time the agenda was a little different. We need to embrace this trend, he stammered, his face pale. We need to show the community that we're not opposed to progress, to innovation, to water. The other HOA members, sensing a shift in the wind, quickly chimed in. Yes, we've always been supporters of aquatic landscaping, declared Mr. Henderson, conveniently forgetting his previous complaints about mosquito infestations and property value depreciation. Indeed, added Mrs. Johnson, her knitting needles clicking furiously, we believe that lazy rivers enhance the aesthetic harmony of our community. And just like that, the HOA did a complete 180. They scrambled to rewrite the rulebook, adding a new section on approved water features. They organized a Community Lazy River Planning Committee, inviting me to be the guest of honor. Talk about awkward? They even started wearing Hawaiian shirts to their meetings, in a desperate attempt to appear fun and hip. It was a glorious spectacle of hypocrisy and desperation. The HOA, once the guardians of conformity, were now tripping over themselves to embrace the very thing they had tried to destroy. And as I watched them flounder, I couldn't help but laugh. They had become a parody of themselves, a cautionary tale of what happens when you try to stand in the way of progress. And a good lazy river. So, the HOA's reign of terror officially over. It was like watching a dictator being overthrown by a bunch of people in swimsuits. Poetic justice, some might say. Bart Prescott, the once mighty HOA president, resigned in disgrace. his dreams of a perfectly uniform neighborhood where every lawn was the same shade of green and every mailbox adhered to strict regulations, were shattered. I heard he moved to a gated community where the only water feature allowed was a bird bath. With Bart out of the picture, a new HOA board emerged. These folks were a little more reasonable. They understood that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of fun wasn't the end of the world. They even admitted that my lazy river wasn't so bad after all. In fact, declared the new HOA president, a friendly woman named Susan, who actually smiled occasionally, we've decided to embrace this new trend of aquatic landscaping. And embrace it they did. The HOA launched the Community Aquatic Landscaping Program, offering workshops on water feature design and even providing subsidies for homeowners who wanted to build their own lazy rivers. The neighborhood was transformed. Backyards that were once barren wastelands of grass and garden gnomes were now adorned with waterfalls, fountains, and even a few mini water parks. It was like a suburban water wonderland, a testament to my victory over HOA tyranny. And me? Well, I was living the dream. I spent my days floating along my lazy river, soaking up the sun, and enjoying the sweet taste of freedom. The HOA, once my nemesis, was now scrambling to keep up with the trend I had started. They were like a dog chasing its tail, forever trying to catch up but never quite succeeding. It was a glorious sight to behold. The HOA, once the symbol of suburban oppression, had become a laughingstock, a relic of a bygone era. And I, the rebellious homeowner with a love of water, had become the champion of fun, the liberator of backyards, the sultan of splash. So, next time your HOA tries to tell you what you can and can't do in your own backyard, remember my story. Remember the lazy river that brought down an empire of beige. And remember, sometimes, the best way to fight the rules is to break them, with style. Okay, so a year has passed, and my backyard is no longer just a backyard. It's a destination. The neighborhood, once a sea of beige houses and perfectly manicured lawns, has been transformed into a vibrant aquatic wonderland. Lazy rivers meander through backyards, waterfalls cascade from rooftops, and inflatable flamingos bob lazily on the gentle currents. Kids zip down homemade water slides, their laughter echoing through the streets. The air is thick with the smell of chlorine and sunscreen, and the sound of splashing water has replaced the monotonous hum of lawnmowers. The HOA? Well, they've finally embraced the inevitable. They've even launched a Community Aquatic Landscaping Program, offering workshops on water feature design and even subsidizing the purchase of inflatable swans. It's a far cry from their initial stance, a comical attempt to regain control in the face of a full-blown water park rebellion. Bart Prescott, the once mighty HOA president, now spends his afternoons watching my backyard from his living room window, a wistful look in his eyes. He even tried to build a small fountain in his own yard, but it ended up flooding his basement. As for me, I'm living the dream. I'm floating on an inner tube, sipping a pina colada, watching the sun set over my aquatic kingdom. The HOA, once the symbol of suburban oppression, is now a distant memory, replaced by the joyous sounds of splashing, laughter, and the gentle gurgle of flowing water. It's a beautiful thing, this watery utopia I've created, a testament to the power of defiance, the joy of rebellion, and the undeniable allure of a really, really good water slide. And as I drift along, I can't help but think, take that, HOA.